Hello and welcome to Testimony Time with me, Del Barefoot, on Revelation TV. It's great to have you, the viewers, with us again today, and we have got an amazing guest, and you're going to want to stay tuned. Her name is Ria Landon. She's one of the Sunday Times top 10 best sellers. Her books, her autobiographical books, have been going like hotcakes, but they're heart-rending to read, and it's great to have her on the show today. Her books are called Escaping Daddy and Daddy's Little Earner, and I would encourage you after the programme to go out and buy those books. Ria, it's lovely to have you on the show today. Your books describe so vividly your traumatic and abusive childhood. You were forced into prostitution at the tender age of 13 by the very man that you should have been nurturing you, should have been protecting you, your very own father. He was a violent man, he was a drunkard, you were raped by him, and he was pimping you at the age of 13. Absolutely horrendous. Could you just share with our viewers some of those painful memories of your childhood and your adolescence?
Well, I guess it's important to say that I can't ever remember feeling safe or secure or even like a child. Every day was just, how am I going to survive this? And just feeling totally lost and bewildered, and we lived in fear all the time, and just hurting, really hurting all the time. That's when I look back at my childhood, that's what I remember. Yes.
And your mum, when you were at the age of 6, I mean, she'd been turning tricks of your father. She was tired of it. She walked out, but she abandoned you. She abandoned the family. How did that affect you?
Well, I guess as an adult, you can look back and think, I know why she did it. I can totally understand why she had to leave. But when you're a child and you experience that, whatever is said, you know, to be abandoned by your mother is just devastating. And it just reinforces those feelings of self-disgust and self-loathing. And, you know, if your own mother can't love you, who can?
And I guess at that age, Ria, you believe that your father is a superhero. He's the guy that you look up to. You believe that he loves you, obviously. And so you do all that you can to make him happy and to please him. But there was no pleasing him. I mean, he was abusive verbally to you. Didn't he say that when you were born, didn't he hold you up and say, welcome my little prostitute? Because he only saw women as a gold mine.
Absolutely.
As a way of earning money by prostitution.
Yeah. From things that I've been told throughout, by other members of the family throughout the years, when I was a baby, he'd said to my mother, you know, at last I've got a girl, and I'll never have to work again because when she's old enough, I'll break her in and put her on the game.
It's unimaginable. I mean, it is horrendous. You've got 2 baby brothers and an older brother, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just find this very difficult to comprehend, and I'm sure many of the viewers that are watching will find it difficult to comprehend as well. But you must have lived in fear every day of your life. And you say that you were afraid of your father. Did he beat you up? Did he abuse you in that way? He told you were useless, didn't he? He told you that you were a failure and that the only thing that you were ever going to be good for was prostitution. That was brainwashed into you from a very, very young age.
Yes, it was. And whatever I did was wrong, constantly. I brought a violin home from school one day. I was so pleased that actually this was something that I could do. And he was like, you can take that back, you're useless, you'll never be able to do that, you're pathetic. And sort of laughed at me, ridiculing me to say, you know, that you're so stupid, you'll never be able to do anything. And that was constant. And this constant blame that I was so bad, that was why Mum had left, because I was just...
He blamed you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And just this constant that he was the only one who would ever love me. Nobody else would ever love me because I was so fat and ugly and useless.
So you never received anything like encouragement or affirmation from him at all?
Gosh, never.
A real sense of rejection, unless you behaved and towed the line and did everything that he told you to do. He sounds like the ultimate control freak. actually.
Yeah, he was. And parents do have control over their children, you know. But this obviously wasn't the healthiest.
And how did he portray himself to the rest of the world? Did anyone else have a clue as to the kind of treatment that you were receiving?
They did, because they knew the lifestyle that he led. But I don't think anybody knew how to stop him. I mean, he'd forced my mother into the prostitution, so it was very difficult to tell him how to do anything.
And were they frightened of him as well?
Yes.
Was there an element of fear?
Yes, there was.
That this man might beat them up or
Yeah.
carry out some kind of violence on them?
Yeah. But apart from that, he was very tall, very handsome, very charismatic.
Really?
People loved him. He would sort of tell this tale of woe about how his wife had left him with the children, and how hard it was to cope. And people felt sorry for him.
He was playing the sympathy card for all that he was worth.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable. So you eventually, having been pimped all these years, you run away. You run away with you say in your book, with an older guy called Brian, who was a biker, is that right?
Yeah.
And he was a drug addict. But there was a relationship there, but you run away. How did you survive in that intimidating and threatening atmosphere of King's Cross? And did your father try to find you?
Yes, I sort of jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, but the guy I was with, there was a genuine relationship there, and it was, although it wasn't the healthiest in the world, there was a genuine love there. And yes, we ran away to London to get away from, you know, the environment that we were living in, and I was 15, but we quickly ran out of money, and before I knew it, we were living in a squat in King's Cross, and I was working the streets again. So that was scary. That was a really scary experience. But by that point, I'd given up, and you get to the point where you don't notice the dangers, because if you die, it doesn't matter anyway. You've got such little value on your life that it doesn't really matter.
So you were almost on automatic pilot. You were in some kind of survival mode, and that
Yes.
was all.
Yes.
Just mere survival and just keeping your head above water and getting enough food. You also had a drug habit as well, is that right?
Yeah, I was then going to say it wasn't about getting the food, it was about getting the next...
Getting the drugs.
The next drugs.
Yeah, what were you addicted to, Ria?
Speed, cocaine, all the sort of amphetamine side.
And did you
drugs.
get into drugs and did you get into alcohol because it desensitized you to the lifestyle that you were being forced to live?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't live that lifestyle and be straight, I don't think, which is why you see such a crossover when people in that lifestyle.
And your father, when he was forcing you into cars to earn money to fuel his alcohol habit and so on, you were drinking half a bottle of vodka, weren't you? I remember reading, or a bottle of vodka, just to completely turn yourself off from the awful reality of what was happening to you.
Yeah. At 13, he was buying me vodkas before I went out.
And before that age, he was dressing you up, wasn't he, as a tart? He was dressing you up in provocative clothing and so on?
Yes. There used to be visitors to the house, drinkers and other women that were involved in prostitution at the time, and they were his friends, and they were the people that I was brought up with. That was just the culture that we, you know, the people that came to the house. So there would be women that turned up in the middle of the night being beaten up by their pimps or, you know, punters that they'd been with. And, you know, you'd come down in the morning and there'd be these waifs and strays, you know, sort of...
You never knew who was going to be there.
No, and, you know, it's just the whole lifestyle. And then they start drinking sort of first thing in the morning, and then it was, you know, sort of try these tights on and try that skirt on. And
you never knew any other kind of lifestyle, did you? You had nothing to compare your lifestyle with, presumably. So you thought that this was the norm, must be the natural way that most people live, until obviously you got a little bit older and understood what you'd gone through.
Yes.
So eventually, out of that relationship with Brian, the good thing that comes out is a baby, and the baby is a delight to you, a young son called Brendan. And you were determined, Ria, to be a good mother, whatever it took. You had to throw yourself for some time on the mercy of social services, of course. But you've said that it was still difficult, even then, to escape your past, and emotional demons were rising up within you. What was that experience like back then? What was life like?
It was difficult, but I was so overawed by being a mum and just having this little life. So it wasn't about me anymore. And even if I didn't care about myself, I had to care about this little life that I'd been given. So I had to work it out. I had to get away, you know. And the night he was born, I was awake all night just looking at him and vowing that he would not be engaged in that world, and I would do whatever it took to keep him out of that. But personally, you know, I was as low as I could be, probably.
Now, on several occasions, you write, and it's very moving in your book, about your attempts to kill yourself, those suicidal attempts, and they were far more than just a cry for help. All of those were very serious attempts to end your life, and praise God, you're here today, that those attempts were unsuccessful. Was that to you an escape route? Is that the only way out that you could see?
It was always an option. I'd seen both my parents attempt suicide. So you see that as an option. And when things get really bad and you just can't take any more of the pain, it seems like the only way out. It's not the right way, though.
Yes. And every time, obviously looking back now, it must have been a God incident. You were prevented from actually dying, except on one occasion that we'll talk about in a minute. But that was incredible, wasn't it? God obviously had his hand upon your life, even though at that time it would have been impossible for you to realise it. Did you have any concept of God back then?
Well, as a child, at one point I'd wanted to go to some friends of ours, some girls that I used to go to school with, used to go to the Sunday school just down the road and come back with biscuits and drinks and say how wonderful it was, and they'd drawn pictures and things, and I asked if I could go, and again Dad had said, you can't go there, they don't want you there, don't be stupid.
Control
why would they
again.
want you? So that sort of tells you that you're not wanted by God, you're not even wanted by God. So I had this idea of God as some scary guy up in the sky who didn't want to know me either. But there was always a hope. There was something, because sometimes I would pray.
Did you?
Yeah. But it was very sort of superficial. It was almost, I didn't know how to connect with him, but I would still pray, especially over my boys' lives. But I didn't understand any of it. And didn't know how to connect.
No. If there's a God, he's out there somewhere. And because of the way my earthly fathers treated me, the Heavenly Father surely would condemn me and not want to know me. Exactly.
There's that absolute fear that you don't want to get too close to him. You don't want to find out too much about him, just in case he turns out like...
Yes. And even if you did form a relationship with this Heavenly Father, he might again turn on you the way that your earthly father did, and the consequences could be even worse. Now, eventually you meet Rodney, and Rodney is, at the time, you see him as your knight in shining armour. That's how you've described him. And he comes from a gypsy background. And suddenly, in this relationship, you have a ready-made family, because you already have Brendan, and he's got 3 children from a former relationship, and a Jack Russell Terrier as well, apparently. So you've got this wonderful ready-made family. And you say in your book that for all his failings and weaknesses, he was a very good dad. He was a very good father. Eventually you marry him and you have a wonderful son, Thomas. But nevertheless, you were living in constant fear. Can you tell us a bit about what it was like living with Rodney, living on that encampment, and just how you were abused as well?
Well, Rodney, from when I first met him, he just totally overtook my life, which I thought I needed. And I just became his wife and a mother, which was fantastic. And I loved the whole, you know, the whole mother and wife experience. But he was very controlling, very possessive. I couldn't go out. I couldn't have my own friends. I couldn't wear makeup. I couldn't wear skirts. And it was very controlled, like I say. But I thought I needed that. I thought I needed to be controlled.
And it's all you knew.
Yes, but obviously as the boys got older, it got more and more difficult to stay with him because I knew I didn't love him. I don't think I was capable of loving anybody at that point. I didn't know what a true relationship was based on you know, all the real things that love really mean. So it was a really difficult time.
Yes, and there was many incidents when he would come home and without any provocation at all, he would actually smash you on the nose. On one occasion, I believe he broke your nose.
Yes, he did.
And there was a terrible incident in a car, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Where he was threatening you, and didn't you have to jump out of the car?
Yeah.
To escape him? Just share a little bit about that.
There was another evening where we'd had a lovely night out, but he'd become very jealous and possessive and accused me of having an affair, which I would not have dared to do. I hated any form of intimacy at that point anyway. Yeah. And in the journey, in the car on the way home, he became really violent, and I just knew what was going to happen when we got home. So I was so scared that I jumped out of the car as it was travelling down the road.
And you were quite injured at the time?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Broke any bones, or?
No, I didn't.
Just superficial cuts and bruises?
Yeah.
That's amazing, really.
It was. Bit of a silly thing to do.
But time and time again, when you got desperate, you returned to Dad and couldn't really understand why you were returning to Dad, but I guess he was a port in a storm. And you bring out in your book the question which many people ask: why is it that people in abusive relationships often return to abusive relationships, or abusive relationships actually attract them? Why do they tend to fall for the same kind of personality types? And I think the conclusion that you came to is that there's a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-worth. And you said earlier, which gave a clue to it really, is that you thought that that was all that you were worth, that you thought that that's what you deserved. Is that the sort of attitude of mind that people that have been abused tend to adopt? Is that what you adopted? Was that your mindset?
There is that, but there's also the other element that there is always in the back of your mind that hope, and you know, you just hope and pray that he will love you enough to be your dad and to stop abusing you. So the fact that you go back for what you hope and want out of the relationship, not what in reality you're going to get. Yeah. So I'd always wanted my dad to be my dad. Right. You know, if a relationship broke up, I'd want him to be the dad again that was going to nurture me and take care of me and make everything better. You never, well, for a long, long time, I never stopped.
But what did he say when you returned to him?
Oh, he just, there you go. What did I tell you? Nobody will ever love you.
Yeah, I told you so.
Yeah.
And just assumed that you would go back to the lifestyle again that you'd come from. Oh, my goodness. And eventually you meet another guy called John, and you really do fall in love with John.
Yes.
And he was in a marital relationship at the time, but that didn't work out. And so eventually you do marry John. But following that, subsequent to that, you suffer very severe and chronic depression. And once again, you try and take your life. Now, this time, this fascinates me, and I'm sure the viewers will like to hear this. You believe that you may have actually have died on this occasion. Is that right? And you actually have God appearing to you. You know, how did he appear, and what did he say? Because what he said surely was more relevant to that situation.
Yes, it was an amazing experience. I decided that that was it, and I went off in the car, took a load of tablets, took a duvet, wrote letters, a big litre bottle of wine, and had it all planned. Went off, took these tablets, drank all the wine, was sitting in the back of this car in this really remote field, and the farmer comes and knocks on the window and says, "Get off my land." So it's like, okay.
That is surreal.
Yeah. So anyway, I managed to get myself home, and I go to bed, lock all the doors, and I go to bed. And the next thing I didn't know at the time, but I was obviously hallucinating. And I have this image of, or it was just surreal how it happened, that I was dead. And I was on this plateau in between heaven and earth. And I was like, "God, you know, come on, take me up to my little cloud and take me up to heaven and make everything better." And God just very clearly said to me, "You're not coming to heaven." And I was like, "Oh, am I going to hell?" And he said, "No, you're not going anywhere. You're staying here." And I was like, "Why? But, you know, I just want to come and be with you." And it was, "No, because you've taken your own life, it will be as if you've never existed." And he showed me a picture of my sons and all my friends and all my family on earth, just living quite happily as if I never existed. And I was like, "Oh, no, I don't want to die." So sort of fell out of bed and made a phone call. And
Ria, how did you get the help you needed? It was a lady called Marion that eventually counselled you, but how did you find her, discover her?
Through a friend from many, many years before being in care, a really delightful couple who'd tried so hard to help me, and all I'd ever done was stick my fingers up at them and wasn't ready to take their help, but they never ever gave up on me, and I had stayed in touch with them. So when things were bad after my first marriage split up, I got in touch with them, and they introduced me quite naughtily, really. It was a bit of a setup, but before I knew it, I was sitting in Marion's office, and Marion I'll never forget it. They both said to me, "You know, what happened to you was horrendous, but it's like a cancer that is inside you, and if you don't deal with it, it will destroy you."
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So I embarked on this counselling.
And it was wonderfully helpful to you. But more importantly, Marion was a Christian, born-again Christian.
Yes, she was.
So she introduced you to God, didn't she?
Yes, she did. And that was a really scary time. But unfortunately, although I sort of made a connection, or I went to church a few times and got a Bible and, you know, things like that, I didn't really make the connection. And my new relationship was more important, I'm afraid.
Yes, but eventually you did. You
Yes.
did have an encounter with Jesus
Yes, I
Christ
did.
and made that
Absolutely.
commitment. Now, you believe with the right help and support, anyone can overcome childhood trauma. You learnt, Ria, to love, respect and forgive yourself. Now you're helping others. You're working for a charity called STEP in Norwich, which actually engages street prostitutes. I just think it's wonderful the way that God has prevented you from being a victim and made you a victor, because you're now able to help them. And is that going well?
Absolutely. I'm just so passionate because I spent so many years, I call them my wilderness years, you know, where I just bumbling along from one situation to another, looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yes.
Looking for ways to heal, and, you know, whether they were healthy or unhealthy. And I'd looked at all the wrong places, and, you know, God had never left my side. He was there all the time. And I just think there's so many women out there and men that don't know what is available, you know, what God wants to do in their lives. So it's just so important to me.
Fantastic work. What does your faith mean to you now, Ria? What does your faith mean to you, and how has it affected you?
It's just everything. God is everything to me. I'm just astonished and overwhelmed every day by the journey we're on together, and just every time I open I never knew there were things in the Bible about how much he loved me and adored me, and what a plan he's got for my life, and how he can use every situation for good, you know, no matter how bad it is. That just amazes me, and it's just such an exciting journey, and I'll never ever be without him again.
That's wonderful to hear. Now, I know you're a relatively new Christian, and as we said earlier, we're all work in progress, but How do you feel about your father now, after all that you've been through? I know that you have met him by chance on one occasion, and he looked a very frail and sick man. But have you started that journey of forgiveness for your father, or not?
Absolutely.
Great.
I feel so disconnected from him now. You know, God is my Heavenly Father. He's the only Father I need. But I can look at both my parents now and just think, well, they're not my problem. And I don't hate them, I don't love them. They're just people, they're God's children. And, you know, I pray for their salvation. And yeah, I do, of course.
Ria, how can people contact you? There may be people watching today that have gone through similar experiences. Perhaps they've buried those experiences, perhaps they've swept them under the carpet. Maybe they don't know Jesus Christ. Can people contact you via your website?
Yes, please do.
Could you just mention how they can do that?
Yeah, if you just Google www.marialandon.co.uk and you can leave comments there in the comment box, or there's my email addresses on there as well. I'd love to hear from you.
That's great. So you're open to questions.
Absolutely.
And we'll also keep some information in the office as well to make sure that people can contact you. And Escaping Daddy was the book that I read. But tell us a little bit about the two books in closing.
Daddy's Little Earner is the first book. It takes me up to the age of 18 and it describes all what happened when I was a child and up until I have in Brendan. The second book, Escaping Daddy, is much more about the long-term effects of childhood abuse.
Yes.
And how to deal with it.
And your journey to faith as well. Because
Absolutely.
Before you finished that book, you became a Christian, and you mentioned some of that as well, which is fantastic. And it's wonderful how God has had his hand upon your life all of these years. And you're going to bring hope to countless thousands of people, Ria. So thank you so much, viewers, for watching. I hope you've been inspired and challenged by what you've heard today. And do get in touch with Ria. Do purchase her books. You will weep when you read them. They are astounding books, but they will change your life. The way that you see things and the way that you view life will change, I promise you. Thank you, Ria, so much for being on the show and sharing so candidly with us today. Bless you.
Thanks for having me.